Hi, everyone. I'm Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun, and your host here at Turning Point Podcast, Stories and Strategies from the World of Business. And joining me today is a longtime friend, Scott Rusnak. He's a certified ESO implementer today, but in his past, he has been involved in some terrific software companies that had some big exits and has some really great experiences to share there before we get up to what he's working on today. So thanks for joining me today, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Blaine. It's almost Thanksgiving down here, and I'm a dual citizen, so I take Thanksgiving on both sides of the border.
Yeah, before we got on the show here, I was saying that I'm up in Canada now, staring out at a bunch of snow and a really gray day, and missing. Generally, we're down in the States for Thanksgiving and enjoying all the beautiful weather and well, it's not turkey. I usually do a beer can chicken on the barbecue, but not this year. This year, I guess we'll be putting up a Christmas tree this weekend and socked in for the winter here.
That's pretty good. I miss the snow.
Yeah, you like skiing. I could do without snow. I'm one of those bad Canadians that could do without snow 365. So anyway, thanks for joining me today, Scott. And what I wanted to do is actually go back to where you first got started in business. What was your first experience in business?
Wow. Do you want to go right back to paper route, Blaine, or where do we go?
Wherever you want to start, but the one that has the most impact on you as an entrepreneur. What was one of those things where you just go, yeah, that was a good starting point? I
think I might go to paper route.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in St. Albert, Alberta, Canada, as you know, which is real close to Edmonton. It's funny. As that kid, I had my own bicycle fix-it shop, fixing bikes and whatnot. And I had a paper route, and the Edmonton Journal made me realize that if I sold more papers and banged on doors and got rejected a lot, that I could get free tickets to the Edmonton Oilers hockey games. And that's when they were in the WHA, and Wayne Gretzky was just coming to town. And I tripled the size of my paper route. I got pushed out a lot of doors, but a lot of people sort of took to my paper route pitch. Right there and then, I knew that I kind of had it I had that thing in my DNA to push myself forward and really achieve a lot in business. So starting point, 6th, 7th grade, it was right there.
You know what? You're not the first one to talk about a paper route. In fact, I had a paper route as well. But you had a bike shop, which was a lot cooler, or a bike fix-it was a lot cooler than what I had. Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of times there's indications or a real drive right from childhood. But where so kind of moving forward now, you're past high school, or you're into the working world. What was your first I guess experience where you would say it's a business owner, entrepreneur that where was a big step for you, like where you had to earn income to pay your bills?
Yeah, Blaine, when I graduated from college, I think the price of oil was $2 a barrel. It was absolutely horrible. University of Alberta, and I was lucky enough, this is probably the first time anyone's ever heard this, that my uncle owned an advertising agency in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. And the person that was supposed to sell ads for this tourism magazine, I guess they didn't want to do it. And I was just graduating, and I was going to take this corporate job, and said, my uncle's like, hey, why don't you give this a go? And I learned a ton from him. His name's Rob Butler. He owned a company called Inkit, and he was a mentor for me. And I met my quota of ad sales within about 3 months. It was supposed to take a year. We had that done in 3 months.
Nice.
And again, it just kind of was like selling papers. It's like, okay, if I do this right, follow the right path, I'd get there. And the cool thing was that I knew I wanted to drive harder and further. And a major corporation was knocking at my door at that point in time. And I was really keen on that software side of the world. And they hired me, and I spent about 3 years there. But I was pretty miserable. I was doing well and kicking butt, but it just wasn't for me. And so a good friend of mine had started a neat software company, and I decided to partner up with them. And we grew that into a pretty cool business over the course of 12, 15 years.
It's 12, 15. So that was a big fast forward there, 12, 15 years at a blink like that. Think back. I'd like you to think back a little bit about, you've you've had an experience. Obviously you have a knack for sales. You've always had, I'm sure you still have a knack for sales, of course. But what was, when you started that business, you went into a partnership, what were some of the real challenges of sort of setting a business up and getting started that actually got you through that 12 to 15 years?
Well, let's put it this way. Back then they didn't have the word startup, right? It was like, you're just starting something new. The word startup was nothing. I was lucky enough to have a little bit of money in my back pocket so that I could scrape by to really push. And the thing was, Blaine, is I put in a lot of 12, 18-hour days driving through Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, hawking our software product. But not only did we need to sell it, but we needed to build it, we needed to support it, and all those other facets. And I guess I put my arms around that and understood that if you get the right people in the right seats executing, you can take on anyone and win. And we actually took on Apple and Pearson and McGraw-Hill, and we did really well. But it's just the right people in the right seats. And if you can surround yourself with the right people in the right seats who really believe and fit your core values, like you and I are friends. I know what you're all about, right? Well, I want to surround myself in my business with those kind of people as well. We did a really good job of doing that.
So this business, when you built it, was this one that you eventually exited from and sold, or was it?
Yeah, it was. I can't go into details, but I did exit. But the crazy thing, Blaine, 2 years into that business, that's when the internet was kicking in. And we had a young son, he was 4 months old, and I had to make a decision whether we were going to move to the States or not. So I put it all on the line, and with really not much in my back pocket, I moved to the States. And I was thinking about this just the other day. They wouldn't allow me to get a cell phone. I couldn't get a car loan. I couldn't get a Visa card. I couldn't get a mortgage. I couldn't get anything because I wasn't a citizen. So I had to work my tail off for the course of the first year to be able to stay legally and as well to get those things in place. So grit, determination, and a lot of chutzpah over that first year or two with a new baby in the wings. It was something else. It was a big challenge.
So this, you said, was only a couple of years into the company. Like, so you guys went from zero to like, you want to be down and have exposure to that market. Were you already looking at that point of, hey, eventually we might be able to sell this? Or was it right then let's just build a business and it eventually sort of went that way?
Yeah, I never thought about selling it. That was never anything I wanted to do. For me, it was like, I wanted to get to the States and I wanted to prove myself. I tried to prove myself as a hockey player and a cyclist. I wanted to become a pro hockey player, a pro cyclist. That didn't work out, which is another sidebar. But I wanted to get to the States and prove that this company was real. I had a lot of people that were doubting what we were doing, kind of looking over their shoulder going, what are you doing? But I just wanted to prove to myself that our business could do it. And, we had a pretty solid base, but people were knocking on the door and the internet was waking up and you could just see that it was there. So never even had a clue that we'd sell it. It was a number of years later that we kind of woke up, or I woke up to that thought.
I can take a little side note here. I've been biking with Scott before, and I didn't know how good a shape he is and like how like basically pro biker he is. And I remember we went for a bike and you're tootling along and I think you were like barely moving the pedals and I'm unbeknownst to you, I hope, behind you, huffing and puffing and just like trying my damnedest to keep up and not look like a loser, wondering why am I not hanging out with this guy. So I felt a little bit better later when I found out like how serious of a bike you were. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a total loser. Like, but holy smokes, you're still in, like, you still bike, I imagine, like almost every day.
I'm getting old. I'll be 55 this year, so I had to change things up a little bit. Four or 5 times a week, I'll jump on the bike.
5 times a week, yeah. That's
when you've been doing something all your life. If all you did was ice skate all your life, and you did that 4 or 5 times a week, it'd be pretty good. It doesn't matter what your genetics are, your gift are. You just get better.
Yeah. It's anyway. I'm always so impressed with the shape you're in, and feel a little bit guilty about the lack of shape I'm in at times. But circling back to where we were. So you're 2 years in. You're, like you said, like I find it really interesting. You picked up, moved to another country. You've got a kid. But you have to establish yourself just initially to stay in the country, but now you've been there a long time. So, you over the next number of years, you managed to really grow the business. And when did it start to come into your mind that, oh, there might be interest in this thing? There's people knocking on our door to maybe buy this thing.
Blaine, I'll tell you, in year 13, 14, I was burnt out. I was the guy that at 30 years old, I was flying 150,000 miles around North America to meet with our regional people and come back and forth to Canada with the leadership team to make sure we're all on the same page. I just got burnt out year 12, 13, 14. I kind of put my hand up with my partners and said, hey guys, this is the road I want to go down. And it's a bit of a sad process. You always think there's a yellow brick road there and here's what it's going to look like. It worked out well for me, but it was an eye opener for me. I'm glad I exited, because the cool thing was when it was all said and done, I got to do what I was put on this earth to do, which is to help coach and advise other entrepreneurs to help them get what they want. So I know I got a little bit ahead of you again there, but it was a rough couple of years when we tried to exit. It worked out okay, but it's really hard. So anyone who thinks that they're going to start a business to sell it, I ask them to take their foot off the gas a little bit and really think about what they want in their life.
It's yeah, and I wouldn't mind digging into that a little bit, because it's the more entrepreneurs that I talk with, there's always seems to be with every one of them some sort of I don't want to say regret, because I don't think I've ever heard anyone say they regret it, but there's a certain sadness and there's a struggle to sell, and it's there's a lot more to it and I've sold a business before, not in the same sort of circumstances as you, but it was stressful and uncomfortable. And no matter sort of where when there's a day where you wake up and go, the phone's not ringing, I don't have 1,000 emails coming in, and it's really uncomfortable. And I'm like, well, now what, and so I do want to dig into that a little bit, because it's whether you like, were you able to walk away, or were you committed to work for the company for a period of time afterwards, or?
A couple of my partners stayed, but I told them that the new culture coming in wasn't a fit for me. So when the ink dried, I was gone. Wasn't going to stay, because I am a true believer. You know this. You become who you surround yourselves with. I wasn't going to surround myself with the wrong people. So for me, it was, I'm out. You take a haircut when you do that.
Yeah.
I left.
And it's, and I've heard many times from people that, entrepreneurs that have left early, or recommend get it in paper as so you can leave as soon as you can, because I don't know if I've ever seen one that stayed more than like a year or two, 3. Well, the typical, kind of 3-year sort of handcuff. Some make it that far, but a lot of them never even make it to that year 3, if that's where, and they leave money on the table, but that's an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, there's some things I wanted to do. I invested in some other companies. I wanted to help them. I started some other interesting things, and I really wanted to do that. And yeah, it's interesting in retrospect. Gosh, we're 12 years since that happened, right? So time flies after. You just got to make sure you've got a purpose and you've really got a vision of where you want to go, so you don't get caught up in that stuff. But I appreciate you bringing me back to that.
It's bringing me back a little bit to that uncomfortable feeling of, wow, I don't really have anything to do, but boy, I better find something to do.
Well, I had stuff to do. I just needed to focus on the right stuff. And I'll be honest, I wasn't focused on all the right stuff.
Yeah. So what was that next step? What were the things that you're really passionate about after you sold that business, that this is what I want to do, this is where I need to be right now?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, I started to coach and advise people as the business was being sold. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. I'd always been a coach in sports. I always worked with kids. Man, I was a camp counselor one summer, right? So I love coaching. I love working with people and seeing them get more out of themselves than they ever thought possible. And I knew I wanted to do that. And I was advising 1, 2, 3, 4 companies at a time. And then I had my finger on my own stuff. And I knew I wanted to go down that road. It took a period of self-discovery and evolution to get to where I am right now. And I don't want to fast forward to today, but it was a real discovery period.
Yeah. Yeah. And so were you primarily like, you said you had invested in some businesses. So you were coaching, you were doing some investment. Were you, like diving fairly deep in any of those businesses, or were you just kind of like foot in a bunch of different things?
I was deep. I can tell you about the winners and the losers, because the losers were ugly. Whoever says they haven't failed, I really don't have a conversation with that person, because they're probably lying, or mommy and daddy have given them $1 billion. But yeah, I was in deep. In fact, I started this was before mobile phones became a big deal, or mobile phone gaming, iPhone gaming became a big deal. I started a virtual world for kids with another partner, and we had a license with the NHL, chatted with the likes of FIFA and MLS and the NFL, and we put a lot of time and energy into that. And we didn't realize that we should have taken some other people's advice. Club Penguin was a big deal then, and these virtual worlds were neat, but the trend was shifting so quickly to iPhones and mobile gaming. We didn't see it happen. And we tried to make a stretch in the end, and we absolutely failed. We lost a lot of money, and it was a big failure, but it was a good lesson for me, because, when I was growing up, some of my coaches would say, when you think can I swear on this podcast? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll tag it as adults only. I've had to do it for a couple.
When you think your shit doesn't stink, it really does. And I have yet to have a big failure like that. So it was a really good lesson. It was the perfect time in my life. My kids were just getting out of junior high, middle school, and going into high school. And I'm going, hey, I got to have their college taken care of. There's all these other kinds of things that I had to do. And I was out there betting a farm on it. So it really pulled me back a little bit to go, okay, what's realistic here? You don't have to put your neck on the line 100% each and every time.
Yeah. Did you have investment for that, or was it bootstrapped, or?
Well, bootstrapped at the start, and then we had some sizable investors, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, they're along for the ride too. Right. So, it's interesting, because when you look at, so often when I talk with entrepreneurs, and many of them have had things that have not worked, and things that have, and it's interesting because, like, the market opportunity there, the idea was there. And oftentimes it's a timing issue, or like new tech came out, and, and again, it probably, comes down so often to timing. If it started a little later, you see the iPhones when you're starting it, or, whatever that is. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, Blaine, you hit the nail on the head. That first software company that we started in 94, I think it was, 93. I look at it as Henry Ford making automobiles. If somebody would have known what we were doing, and if the internet was real, I don't think we would have made it past the first year. But we were just cobbling together this stuff and just building it. And we had people who trusted us, and we worked our tails off. We supported them. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have made it past year one, and we wouldn't have grown to where we were. There's no way in the world. So yeah, we absolutely got lucky. My soon-to-be father-in-law was the guy who was like, you might want to look at this area in the market. And that's where my light bulb went off. And when the opportunity was there, I just jumped on it. So we got lucky.
Yeah. Yeah.
No question.
So you mentioned it, like, so you had the one business ended up failing in the end. What was your next thing? Were you nervous to dive into something right away, or did you have 10 other things going you wanted to jump into, or, where were you at that point?
I don't know if you've ever heard of the Colby score, but I have a weird score that I'm a high quick start. I'm an 8, which pretty much means, oh, there's surf out there. I'll be back in a minute, right? But we'll do this. I'm going to go surf and I'll be back. So there were a lot of really cool opportunities. I'd invested in, became a licensee for Golf Now, which was a raging hit, right? It was just an incredible business. And 2 or 3 others that were smaller but had done really well. And so, no, I had my eye on a number of other things while still coaching a few other businesses. So I was ready to go, but the hardest part, Blaine, is, I didn't want a bunch of employees. I like a scalable, repeatable model that just is almost on the tip of people's tongue. So when you get to the scalable, repeatable, that's on the tip of someone's tongue and you can really get there, that's a really cool business to be in. And that's really what I wanted.
Yeah. Yeah. So where, what was your next, I guess your next big thing? How many years ago was this when you ended up kind of walking away from that, that business?
Gosh, 13, 14 years ago. I get older every day, soon to be 55. I don't know how that happened. I think it was 41, 42 when that happened. Yeah. So 13, 14 years ago.
Okay. And where did you go from there? Like, I think actually probably not long after that was probably when we met. I'm
Yeah.
not exactly sure, when 10, 12 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Just goes quick. But
Yeah, I did a lot of consulting. There's a couple companies out of San Francisco, one out of Brooklyn, some in the media space. I was helping them get the right people in the right seats, measuring them with discipline and accountability, trying to get all these tools in place with them. I was working with 3 or 4 at a time, and they were kind of getting there, but it was cool, and I was having a good time, and they saw some good traction, and we'll get onto that later, but I wasn't doing it the right way. I was just kind of, again, you can bleep me out, half-assing it. Like I was doing a pretty good job, but I wasn't fully committed to a strong process of tools and discipline to get them there. But they were happy. They didn't know any better. And today they look back and they talk to me, they're like, man, it sure would have been nice if you would have put into the place what you're doing now. And I'm like, well, happenstance, right? You look back.
You're learning too. So, but you bring, obviously a lot of experience to them. So what was your, those companies, like I also want to get into how you managed to deal with companies on the, in the East and the West, and the, how, I'm guessing you were on planes all the time again.
Yeah, a lot of planes, a lot of Skype. But yeah, again, I was traveling a ton, was doing some stuff in Europe. I was getting tired of it. But they found me, so that was pretty neat. I always wanted to be, a thought leader. I wanted people to be like, oh, talk to Scott. So that was pretty neat. But the Scott brand isn't as good as, hey, tying together with a community or a group that's got a structure. But it was a struggle, and I wasn't around a lot. But I really cut my teeth again in my mid-40s, going, okay, there's something else here that can get me and these companies to the next direction.
So when you were helping these companies, you can talk in general about all of them, or one or two. What was the core? Like, what did you find was the biggest mover? Was it like operations, day-to-day management, longer term vision? What were some of the key aspects that you saw that the companies are struggling with that helped move them to excel?
So 3 things, and I don't want this to sound too corny, but first thing is vision. Everybody's got to understand where we're going and how we're going to get there. And I mean everyone from the CEO to the janitor to the receptionist to the VP ops. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? We've got to just over-communicate that vision. The second is something that I call traction. Everyone's got to be running with discipline and accountability to be able to get there. They're not afraid to be measured. And the last part is healthy. We've got to have a open, honest, healthy leadership team that lives and breathes by those core values. A lot of people call that culture, and that's really important. But the reality is, as goes the leadership team, so goes the business. So if we can get everyone understanding the vision, work with discipline and accountability, we can have a healthy business. And that doesn't mean it's $1 billion business. It could be the best run $4 million a year business. And I know you've put a lot of the tools in place that we've talked about, but it's those 3 components that if you can put those in place, and then, there's more tools that you've got to look at, but if you can get those 3 things straight, you're off to the races.
So yeah, and we will get to some of my experiences in that too, and where you are today. But like you said, where you are today, you have, as an EOS implementer, you have systems but back then you said you didn't necessarily have the systems in place, but you seem to have an intuitive understanding of what the weaknesses were and that they needed to be addressed.
Yeah, I've always been a big fan of Patrick Lencioni, 5 dysfunctions of a team. And you go through an exercise and you talk about his 5 dysfunctions of a team. And if you're sitting there talking to a leadership group, you talk about trust. We need to have trust based on vulnerability. Well, only when we have trust can we have a little bit of conflict. Then we can become accountable. Then we'll commit. Then we get results. And when you dig into that in a deep way, you'll see people sitting back, and you can read from the body language if people are nervous. You're probably not the right person at the right seat. So I kind of cobbled that, used that, and I was a big fan of the Rockefeller habits. I just love 90-day rocks. There's something in human nature that says you've got to reset every 90 days. Then I became a fan of OKRs and measure what matters. And that's leading indicators you can look at every week. I was like, man, there's got to be a way to pull all this together. And the universes collided. And a really good friend of mine, a lifelong friend of mine, said, Scott, you got to read the book Traction. And so when I read that book, the light bulbs went off. I was actually pissed at myself that I hadn't pulled it together to agree to make it that simple. And that was probably 7 or 8 years ago when I first read that book, and everything changed from there on.
Yeah. And so what I find really enlightening too is that you have experiences, you've had some successes, some failures, some good lessons. You're working with all these different businesses, a lot of experience. But the thing that you keep showing over and over again is that you're willing to learn and want to learn, and you're looking at systems, and you're looking and analyzing these things and learning from them, and then applying them. It's not like I kind of read it, threw it on the bookshelf. You actually apply those lessons.
Yeah. In fact, I just left a client's location and reiterated to them that here's our path moving forward the next quarter, and here's the path for the next year. So everyone's on the same page of what those lessons are going to be. And the crazy part, Blaine, is I read a new book every week. I'm just a crazy reader. I just digest that stuff like crazy. But you can't put all that into a business. You got to stick with simple, practical ways, or else people forget everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just stick with the basics and the good stuff.
And this is a good time to fast forward to a little bit to what you're doing today, because I, like you mentioned, I have some experience with some of the EOS systems we were talking about before we went online today, about the L10 meeting that I highly recommend to anyone and everyone who's running a business with more than one person. It's hard to, no, actually, even if you're one person, I suppose it's still a good exercise to go through. But I'm just kind of joking a bit, but yeah, it's bringing some sort of discipline in like that has been just a really big change for us, a really big game changer. And so you said you first read the book Traction about 7, 8 years ago. What made that stand out from all of these other systems and reading and everything you've done, and sort of headed you into this your position now as a EOS implementer?
Just simple. It all pulled it together, right? Just like, boop, here you go. You could build a house in the middle of nowhere and it could be a wonderful house. That'd be great. But if you built a house, you knew what the community was going to look like around it. You had good neighbors, and there's the supermarket, there's your pub, there's the bike trails, there's everything. And you knew what you want to look like. When you look down at 40,000 feet, you're like, here's how we could design it. That's what you want to do. And that's the same thing Traction did for me. Had me step back at 40,000 feet and look down at every business and go, okay, I know where we can go because here's a roadmap. I just think when people have a roadmap or a blueprint and they understand the expectations of where they're going and they're not out in the middle by themselves, they can usually get what they want. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about making the move from reading this book to how did you actually move to the point where you became, like that's actually your role today, right?
Yeah. Well, I failed again, right? So I read the book. I was like, I can do this. I can follow through and help my clients. So again, I was helping them, but not to the degree that I should. Implementing some tools. Level 10 is a great tool. Scorecard, well, you can implement it, but are those really leading indicators? And I was stumbling, and my clients didn't know I was stumbling, but I knew something wasn't working right. And finally, at that point in time, I was actually working on Vancouver Island, and a lifelong buddy of mine is like, look, you got to do this the right way if you're going to do it. I'm like, 100% right. So I put my hat in the ring and went through a formal process with EOS to become professional designation and then certified. And I don't want to turn this into an EOS commercial. That's the last thing I want. But I think what it really says is if you're going to do the right thing, you got to fully commit. You just can't, again, half-ass things. You just can't kind of dip your toe in the water and say, hey, I want to win an Olympic gold medal. You got to really put the reps in. So I bet the farm again and said, I'm going to put my shingle right here and off we go.
And so fast forward to today a little bit. You've like you mentioned before, 110 businesses that you've helped coach. Is that over the years, or is that?
Yeah, that's in the last dozen years, and it's really cool. The ones that have truly implemented EOS to the pure form, they're kicking butt, taking names. And you and I had a little bit of a conversation before this, talking about COVID. We were all nervous in March. April came around, and a lot of my clients from the past years, I was going to say the olden days, called me. I said, "No, you know what you're doing. Here's the tools. Here's the structure. You can get there." And the clients I've onboarded this year, all but one are kicking butt and taking names. And the other one is an airline services business. And they'll come around. They've figured out a way to sort of rejig a little bit and refocus. So, yeah.
So what, tell me a little bit, because there's a lot of people out there that aren't familiar at all with the EOS. I wouldn't have heard them except for you had told me a little bit about, sitting over beer and you're telling me a bit about it. And then I'm looking at it and going, that seems really smart. At that point, I think our team was like 3 or something. So probably wasn't best fit, but it was really intriguing. And like I said, as we start to grow, we're still a startup and relatively small, but as we're growing and our team's growing, putting these systems into place, I'm more of a believer every day in having, systems and processes that drive us forward. But tell the listeners a little bit about EOS. If they're not familiar with it, what exactly is it? And what are some of the cornerstones?
Yeah. EOS, it's the Entrepreneur Operating System. And it really is just a complete set of simple concepts and practical tools that have helped thousands of entrepreneurs get what they want. And the interesting thing is we've got a toolbox that has got 20 tools in it. We've got foundational tools such as an accountability chart, not an org chart. An accountability chart, which means everybody on this chart is going to be accountable for something. You mentioned the level 10 meeting before. Here's the way that every week we're going to get on the same page within 90 short minutes with our rocks, our 90-day priorities, our scorecard, which are leading indicators we've got to report on each week. We're going to make sure that people understand what the 5 leadership abilities are. We're going to make sure that the 8 cash flow drivers are there, that we're leading, managing, holding people accountable, using a tool like the People Analyzer to make sure people fit the right core values. Making sure people are taking clarity breaks, steps away from their day to make sure they're looking down the business and really understanding what's going on. So again, EOS, just these simple, practical tools. And we say, if you want to get a grip on your business, you want everything you want traction, just follow the tools and you'll get there.
Yeah. And it's again, I'm looking, I'm trying to turn it into a EOS commercial just for you guys to know that. I like from, and I'm, Scott will scold me after, cause we were like the one he just explained our dipping our toe in here and there as we figured this out. But I will tell you that the where we've dipped our toe in, it just kind of like you start pulling on a string going, yeah, we got to do more of this. We got to do more of this. We got to do more of this, because our first big shift was this L10 meeting that I highly recommend, we just sort of, I'll admit, figured out how to sort of implement it ourselves and kind of work it our way through. But it's been a fundamentally powerful process for us that I've been recommending to people left and right all over the place lately. So
yeah, good. Well, you're a true entrepreneur and you're digging in and getting it done.
We're doing, yeah, we are. We're doing what we can. We're learning every day, and as the business grows, we're trying to bring in more and more process and discipline to make sure we're effective. There's been times where it's felt, and I know everyone in business has felt this, that everyone's working their ass off, and but sometimes it's like the old cartoon where there's a knot in the middle and ropes out and everyone's running in the opposite direction and you're not moving anywhere. And at times you look back and go, oh, okay, well, how do we get past that? And it's some of the processes and guiding principles and vision that you talked about that at one time, I'd probably go, okay, well, yeah, I don't really need that. And now you're kind of going, well, no, you have to have something to circle around. You have to have that goal that the team circles around. And you have to have something that you can measure, that it shows that you're making progress, that you can, and so all of these things that I had heard before, I feel like I'm starting to understand now, and it's helping us move the needle. So
That's good. Well, I'll break it down. If everyone understands the vision, you got the right people in the right seats, they're not afraid to be measured, they easily put their hand up and say, we've got an issue. We can make sure that gets solved with something we call IDS, identify, discuss, solve. You put those processes or processes in place. We're good on both sides of the border with that. And they're followed by all. People really get it. That can become your secret sauce to get traction. To get traction, you got to make sure you got 90-day rocks and you're running that level 10 meeting like you're doing right now.
Yeah. I'm going to show that to the team after we get off. Put this little piece out. Okay, guys, here's next step for us. It's until we can afford to corner you and make you sit with us. So anyway, you know what? I really, this has been really great, Scott. Is there anything else you wanted to share? It feels like we've, kind of got up to where you are today, and any big learnings or anything that are.
I was like really hoping you'd ask. In fact, my new book, The Entrepreneur's Field Guide, you're good, is just done press run number 1. There's going to be some edits, as you know, any book, there's lots of edits, but there's some really great tools in there. And it's really a glorified planner. I call it a planner on steroids. It'll allow you to refocus every 90 days with a weekly planner, journaling pages, and some lessons in between. So it's just kind of built for entrepreneurs like you and I.
I'm looking forward to reading that. I've only seen, just like you guys, I saw the cover. I had a little sneak preview earlier today, but I've only seen the cover of it. So I'm anxious to read it too. So, because I believe in Scott and his insight in the processes and, how much you focus on moving businesses forward. And that's, here at Dryrun, that's our philosophy is we want to move independently owned businesses forward. And that comes down to the business owner and to the entrepreneur. And that's who we love. That's who we care about. And anything that helps them move forward, we're on board with, right? So it's, that's how would people find, okay, 2 questions. First of all, when will people be able to get your book and how?
Yeah, so they can go to my website. It's really simple, scottrusnak.com, RUSNAK. We should have it up on Amazon in a couple weeks. So the Entrepreneur's Field Guide will be on Amazon, just going through that approval process. And then we'll have a website. The website's already there. It's just not the Entrepreneur's Field Guide. So yeah, it's cool. Actually, I've got 300 pre-orders, and I was only going to print 100 off the first batch for my early readers to really dig in and find the errors. So I guess I'm rolling the dice again because these people who have ordered it are going to probably find some errors, but that's what it's like.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm one of the funniest things that happened to me was a friend of mine read my book, Pandemic Cash Flow. It's about cash flow, and you probably have the one with all the errors in it because a friend of mine went through it, and he this guy could edit anything. He went through, he sent back the book. There was stuff written on every single page in that book. I had to go through and edit the entire thing. And so now if you get it, it's the new version, but he picked up every typo, and also big sections where he would say, add this would be really great. So it was so useful.
I got your back because perfection isn't reality. That's utopia. It's never going to exist. If he wants perfection, I'm probably not the coach for him. But if he wants to get to 90%, or any business does, I love talking about that because actually in chapter 37 of my book, I talk about perfection. You can't get there. A really good friend of mine was the first North American to win an Olympic gold medal in ski jumping and cross-country skiing. He's like, my day was a 7 out of 10, but I had a great team behind me. I won a gold medal. Can you believe it? So.
That's I've never even thought of it that way. You just think if you win a gold medal, it's 10 out of 10. And that's an interesting, all of the work up and everything to the day. I never thought about that before.
All the prep, I talk about enjoying the ride. It's the journey because it's not about that day. It's about all the work you got to put in to say, hey, this feels really good. When I left my client this morning, I was driving back, big smile on my face. I was talking to a friend. He's like, oh man, I'm just completely overwhelmed. I'm like, why? You should be really smiling. It's, Thursday's Thanksgiving, man. I'm taking Friday off. Like, you should have a little bit of gratitude. And I always say to my clients, wake up every morning and be grateful for what you have because you got to enjoy the journey. If you think it's this end game, a Super Bowl or a gold medal moment, you're going to be really depressed a few weeks after because you may never be able to achieve that again.
Yeah. And it takes a long time. Like we've been in this, our battle for a long time, and you have to stop and smell the roses. And I'm not necessarily that great at it, but I try and have even a life outside of work. So I'm not thinking about it 24 hours a day, because I used to think it's a marathon. Now it feels like, it's like the trek around the world. Like, no,
buddy.
it's a lot longer,
You must have read the book already, because I talk about, if people think the entrepreneurial dream is a marathon, they're wrong. Back in 86, 87, I was at the Edmonton Folk Fest drinking way too many beers, and everyone was talking about how they're going to run the marathon and all the rest. I just laughed at them. You guys are crazy. You're training wrong. I made a bet, and I was ill of mind that day, too many beers. In 7 weeks, I trained for the marathon and did a 3:05. I wanted to go sub 3, but I kind of seized up a little bit. And I look at that like an entrepreneurial life. You can't make it so you take a bet and you train for 6, 7 weeks or 2, 3 years and then put it all aside. It's a trek around the world a number of times.
Yeah, it's a slog, and it feels like, and I've said this lots of times, and of course entrepreneurs can all relate to this, is you're climbing that next ridge, and you're covered with cuts and mud and muck and blood, and you just come over the ridge and like, thank God. And then there's a taller mountain right behind, and and that goes on for years. It's just, that's the fight, that's the battle, but somehow we thrive on that. I wouldn't do anything else, but it's just a long haul, and you got to enjoy it. You got to enjoy the battle.
Let's just break it down. We're unemployable.
Oh, totally. No one would want to hire me, and I wouldn't last a day.
Some guy the other day was like, "Do you have a resume?" I don't know what that is.
I can't remember what we needed for some sort of, I don't know if it was a client thing or a grant thing or something a few years ago. And I had to put in a resume for me. And I'm like, what? I don't have a resume. I don't even know how to make it. And so then I found there was this nifty little tool where you just export LinkedIn.
That's it.
And it says resume on the top. I'm like, oh, there you go. It's like done. Cause I haven't worked for another company in a couple of decades. I haven't had a day job, I guess.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you a question. So you're an entrepreneur, you're a visionary for your business. Do you feel like you're working?
It's a weird question. It doesn't feel like work, but it's hard.
Sure.
I don't know. Like it's like, yeah, if it's so tough, it's a massive battle, but it doesn't feel like work. Like, I don't feel like I have a work day. It's like you're in the game, you're playing hockey or whatever. That's not, well, even for pros, do they really feel like it's work? No, no matter how hard it is, right?
Yeah, there you go. Now my neighbor, it's funny, I'm in Scottsdale today. So I split my time between Scottsdale and San Diego. But Scottsdale today, I've got a great neighbor. He's a retired lawyer. He always, pokes me in the nose. He's like, off to work? I'm like, no, I don't work. He's like, wow, I didn't know you were retired. I'm like, no, I've been retired since I was 30. Just in my mind, I'm doing what I've always dreamed of. I absolutely love what I'm doing, and I'm passionate, so it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's something out there where it's a battle that may be a little less stressful than tech startup world, but it's not work. It's a dream, and it's that we have to. It's those things where those little comments where you hear people talk about changing the world and things like that, whatever. But really, there's a point where, no, that's what we're out to do. that is what we want to do. And there's a change somewhere. Yeah. Where you want to change the world. You want to be the world leader. And it's just, I don't think it's an overnight thing. It sort of just evolves and it becomes, that when they talk about mission and vision and these things, it becomes real at some point. That's what we're trying to do, right?
Well, I hope that we have the vision to get a vaccine and we can make this COVID thing go away and dissipate so you can get your butt down here. We can get a beer. What's the name of that place we went last time?
The Whining Pig?
That's what it is. That's a good spot.
I actually checked the other day just to make sure they're still open, because I'm like, man, if they've closed, I'm going to be so heartbroken. Looks like they're still there, and I'm still holding out hope that if we're just, for everyone listening, we're November 24th today. So we're pre-vaccine, and hopefully in a few months this will be, that was pre-vaccine. I'm still holding out hope that we'll make it down maybe December, early in the new year. Probably a little bit of wishful thinking, but we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Hope to see you, buddy.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to having a beer with you, whether it's now or might be next fall. But anyway, looking forward to it. And thanks so much, Scott. And so I know you mentioned already, people can find you at scottrusnak.com. And I'm sure they can track you down on LinkedIn. And any other way or anything else you want to mention before we sign off here?
I just think, I was at a talk once and they talked about the faux entrepreneur, like a faux paint job or a faux or a fake. You can't fake being an entrepreneur. You got to be all in. It's got to be part of your DNA. Like you said before, it's a journey. If you think it's a marathon, you're wrong. You've really got to be all in. And I think if you can realize it's in your DNA and you know where you want to go and you get the right people and you really want to be disciplined, you can get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And for all you guys out there that are running a business, looking for a way to take that next big step, track Scott down. That's what he does. He helps businesses that are they're growing, but really nail it down and accelerate and run the business the right way. Thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in today. It was great catching up again, Scott, with you. And as always, guys, if you need some help managing your cash flow, please look us up at dryrun.com. We'd love to help you out with that. And in the meantime, watch for our next episode coming up soon. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Brian.